This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. The vast majority of the videos in this series look back at the game's history and rank cards based on how they have performed at the game's highest level. However, every time a new set comes out, I also do an MTG Top 10, giving my picks for the 10 biggest bombs in the set for drafts. A bomb is a card that can completely reshape the game in your favor. The cards in this video are the 10 cards you most want to see in pack one, pick one situations if you're drafting Modern Horizons, and they are so strong that your draft will sometimes completely shift if you open one of them or are past one of them later in the draft. Now, let's get started with the list. At number 10, I have Kess, Dissident Mage. A 4-mana 3/4 flyer is great, but what really makes Kess powerful is her ability that on each of your turns you can cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. That card then gets exiled, so you can't use the same card over and over again, but that is an incredible source of card advantage that can really win you the game. Now, she's incredibly powerful, but she is held at 10 on this list for two reasons. One of them is that she's 3 colors. There is fixing in this set, but there's not an incredible amount, especially if you're not in green, so drafting her pack one, pick one comes with some inherent risks, because you may not pick up enough fixing to play her. Additionally, she has to be in a deck with lots of instants and sorceries, otherwise you're not going to make use of her ability very well. Granted, as I said, she is still a 4-mana 3/4 flyer, so even if you only have 3 or 4 instants and sorcery, she's probably still worth playing if you have the fixing, but she's not going to feel like the number 10 bomb in this set unless you have 7 or more instants and sorceries. At number 9, I have Ursa, Lord High Artificer. Now, Ursa is an artifact build-around, and he's in a set that doesn't have that much going on artifact-wise, but there are a few. But even in a vacuum, Ursa is a bomb and a powerful card. On his own, he's a 4-mana 1/4 who makes a 1/1 token, and then that token can add blue mana to your mana pool. So he ramps you, makes 2 bodies, and that's pretty good for 4 mana. Then, on top of that, in the later part of the game, you can start pumping mana into him and cast cards from the top of your library for free. I mean, it's not really free because you pay 5. If you were flooding out or something like that, Ursa will be able to really help you get through the game because you're going to be able to pay 5 whenever you want to and hopefully cast a card off the top of your library. He can hit a land, but the fact of the matter is this mana sink ability is incredibly powerful. Ursa gets even better in a world where you have more artifacts around because the creature token he creates will be even larger. So yeah, between giving you 2 bodies with 1 card and helping you ramp and having a powerful mana sink ability, Ursa is one of the biggest bombs in the set. At number 8, I have Deep Forest Hermit. When you play the Hermit, you're paying 5 mana for a total of 9 power because you get 4 1/1 squirrel tokens and then she pumps all of your squirrels, so they're all 2/2s. She does come with vanishing, and that does mean that eventually you'll lose the ability that pumps all of your squirrels. But the squirrels she made stay behind, and you're still getting a really good rate because you get to keep those 4 squirrels, in addition to the fact that they were even larger for a little while. There are other ways you can abuse Deep Forest Hermit too. There are ways at common to blink creatures in this format. Ephemerate is a 1 white mana spell with rebound that lets you exile your creature and then it comes back into play. That will both reset her vanishing counters and make 4 more squirrel tokens, which is when things get really absurd. Additionally, Deep Forest Hermit gets some additional value from the fact that there are changelings in this set, and she will be pumping all of those as well. At number 7, I have Genesis. Obviously, a 5-mana 4/4 isn't very good, but Genesis gets the most value out of being in the graveyard, because if it's in your graveyard at the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 2 generic and a green to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Worst case scenario, you're returning your Genesis, and I mean, yeah, 5-mana 4/4 is not great, but if it can just keep coming back, it gets to be pretty good. That's not really what makes it a bomb, though. That's enough to make it a good card. What really makes it a bomb is the fact that if there are other creatures in your graveyard, you can start returning those as well. And I think it gets an extra boost in this set because both black-green and red-green are decks really interested in loading up their graveyard, and if you can get Genesis into your graveyard, you're going to win a game as a result, especially if it's a game that has gone on for a while, because you're just eventually going to outcard your opponent by a huge amount. Which, like Genesis and Kess, is a reprint, and it's the final reprint to make this list. They're also kind of similar cards, not exactly in what they do, but in how they help you win a game. Future Sight lets you win a game because you start being able to play the top card of your library, which essentially means you always have an extra card in your hand, and sometimes it's even better than that because you can just start ripping cards off the top of your library if you have a bunch of cheap spells on top. Note, you can also play lands from the top of your library. This will just give you huge card advantage in a game, and it'll eventually allow you to win the game. Now, both Future Sight and Genesis may not be quite as good as I expect if this format turns out to be blistering fast, but it doesn't mostly look like it's going to be that way, and I think both Future Sight and Genesis will be really, really good first picks. Future Sight does have sort of a prohibitive mana cost, but at least it's all in one color, so, it is doable, but that is something to keep in mind about Future Sight, but I still think you should first pick it every time you see it. At number 5, I have Endling, which is the final card in a cycle of shapeshifters that end with Ling that began way back in Urza's saga with Morphling. Like the other cards in the cycle, Endling has a bunch of abilities, and all of those abilities together make it a pretty great card. It can give itself Menace or Death Touch. Both together is a pretty potent combo because it's at least going to mean you get a 2-for-1, since a creature with Menace has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. You can also give it Undying, which means that at least the first time, your opponent can actually kill Endling, and then, like all of the Morphling creatures, it also can increase its power at the cost of lowering its toughness, and vice versa. I think what really sells me on this being a straight-up bomb is that ability to gain Undying. Provided you play this and leave 1 mana up, there aren't very many cards in this set that can kill Endling, because Endling will just come back, and in fact, Endling will come back even larger than when you add the ability to be evasive, the ability to kill anything thanks to Death Touch, and the ability to raise its power or toughness, whichever it needs to do. Endling comes out as a pretty great bomb in this set. At number 4, I have Winds of Abandon, a removal spell that turns into a one-sided Wrath effect in the late game. It does allow your opponent, for each creature you exile, to search their library for a basic land card and put it into play tapped. That does keep this card in check a little bit, and it kind of means that in the really early game, you have basically no reason to want to cast Winds of Abandon, because in the early game, allowing your opponent to ramp is a really, really bad idea. However, once it's mid-game or so and your opponent plays a bomb and you can just kill that bomb with Winds of Abandon, and yes, they get to search their library for a land, but it's going to be worth it most of the time. But I think when this card really feels like a bomb is when you overload it and use it to just wipe your opponent's entire side of the board. And if you're doing that, they're probably not going to have anything to spend their mana on that they're now searching for. They're not going to have creatures in play with activated abilities or anything like that because they're all gone now. And now, you should basically just win the game on the spot. In most cases, when you cast this with Overload, all of your creatures survive and they can just bash into your opponent over the next couple of turns, if that's even needed, and they'll be dead. At number 3, I have Fallen Shinobi, which like Kess is gold, but unlike Kess, Fallen Shinobi is only 2 colors. Fallen Shinobi also works in a much wider variety of decks. You don't really need to build around it at all. Even if this were just a 5-mana 5/4 that when it dealt combat damage to a player, then exiled the top 2 cards of their library, and until end of turn you could cast those cards without paying their mana cost. So if you just took Ninjutsu off of this, it would still be a really great card and would probably make the list maybe a little bit lower. But with Ninjutsu, well, it's one of the biggest bombs in the set, and maybe it could even appear at number 1. I sort of have demoted it to number 3 because it is 2 colors, which makes it a little less desirable to take pack 1, pick 1, but I don't imagine you ever passing this pack 1, pick 1, and I imagine you trying to splash it if you get it late. The ninjutsu ability means that it's going to be a lot easier for you to get at least 1 trigger out of this ninja, and 1 trigger out of this ninja is already giving you 2 extra cards. Sure, if you hit a land, you don't get to do anything with it, but any other cards you hit, you can cast for free, no mana at all. Then once it's been ninjutsu'd into play, if it just keeps hitting your opponent, they're going to be dead. Like I said, I think hitting them once is often going to be enough to win the game, and each additional time you hit them, it becomes increasingly unlikely that your opponent can win the game. It just gives you way too much card advantage, in addition to having reasonable stats and the powerful ninjutsu mechanic. At number 2, I have Sword of Truth and Justice. The other sword actually doesn't make the list, because what it does when the creature it's equipped to does combat damage to the player just won't be relevant enough. It destroys a planeswalker and an artifact when it does that, which can be pretty sweet in, like, actual modern maybe, but not so sweet in limited. Sword of Truth and Justice, though, is as sweet as all of its predecessors. Like all of them, it grants +2/+2 and protection from 2 colors, in this case white and blue, so you're already having protection from 2 of the 5 colors in the game, which is pretty great against most opponents, especially in Limited, when everyone's playing 2 colors. The chances you're playing against one of those colors are significant, but then it also, like all of the swords in this cycle, does something when that equipped creature does combat damage to a player. In this case, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, then proliferate. So you basically put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, and if you have other +1/+1 counters around, you proliferate again. Between the stats boost, the protection, and the fact that it's going to grow one of your creatures incredibly rapidly, and in fact the best thing to do with it might be to put a counter on a different creature each time because proliferate can snowball, but at any rate, it can completely run away with the game, and then on top of all of that, it is colorless. And that means if you first pick this, you're playing it 100% of the time, and that feels pretty good. And at number 1, I have Serra the Benevolent. Serra has a bunch of powerful abilities. The first thing you're generally going to do when you play her is use her -3, which creates a Serra Angel. In other words, a 4/4 flyer with Vigilance. That does lower her loyalty to 1, but a 4/4 flyer with Vigilance is going to protect her pretty well, and it can continue to protect her. Unlike a lot of creature tokens Planeswalkers make, this one has Vigilance and Flying, so it's going to be able to pressure your opponent while also protecting Serra in most cases. After that, you probably use her +2 to hit them for 5 with that angel the next turn. Then you probably +2 again, and then after that you can make another angel. You can also work towards her ultimate, which is pretty great too. It does the worship effect, which means that if you have a creature in play, your life can't be reduced lower than 1, and wouldn't you know it, she happens to create a creature. So maybe sometimes the right thing to do is to make the creature, use that +2 a few times, and then get the emblem, and then maybe you're in really great shape. What we're saying here is that the worst case for Serra the Benevolent is that you get a 4-mana 4/4 with Flying and Vigilance. If that's your worst case scenario, you're in great shape, and her best case scenario is just completely absurd. She has a great floor and a really high ceiling. She's going to win the game most of the time when you play her, and for me, that means she's the biggest bomb in the set. Well, those are my picks for the 10 biggest bombs in Modern Horizons. Do you think there are any I left out or any cards I'm overrating? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. On Friday, we'll be looking at a different aspect of Modern Horizons, and that is my favorite cards in the set that reference older cards. Thanks for watching.